Good morning, everyone, and welcome to part two of Zivver's Public Sector webinar series. My name is Matt, and I'm a marketing manager here at Zivver, and I'm going to be your host for today's session. Now, we have a very exciting speaker lineup for you today in the form of our very own CEO, Wouter Klinkhamer, and also our principal product manager, Kees Postma. But before I invite them both to join me on stage, I'd just like to point out a few things for the attendees today. Firstly, if you missed part one of this webinar series, where we discussed why email is king in secure digital communications, please look at the related content box on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. There you'll be able to watch the recording of part one on YouTube. Secondly, if you have any questions for our speakers today, please make sure you submit these in the Ask a Question box, which is also on the left-hand side of your screens. We'll be answering any questions during the Q&A section at the end of today's webinar. However, if we do run out of time, don't worry, we'll email the answers to you once the session has ended. So please don't be shy and make sure you submit your questions throughout the webinar. Lastly, if you're wondering if there will be a recording, absolutely there will be. We'll be distributing these to all attendees once the session has ended. Right, with that out of the way, I'd now like to invite our speakers, Wouter and Kees, on stage. Gentlemen, good morning. Please could you formally introduce yourselves?
Very good morning, Matt, and thank you for introducing us like that and setting the scene. Very good morning to, or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world for our participants. My name is Wouter Klinkhamer, CEO and co-founder of Zivver, now 7 years into this business. And I once pulled that face in front of a camera, and that is apparently how I will now live forever on. I'm a self-proclaimed advocate for what I call right-sized digital security for organizations across all sectors. And with right-sized, I'm talking about enough security, but not enough, because typically not too much, because too much security comes at the cost of reduction of effortlessness. I'm quite passionate about the user experience from employees to recipients, and I also consider myself a core user of email, and therefore one of the people that I deeply care about. And I'm proud to lead a world-class team in the development of what we call the third generation of secure email solutions with effortless smart technology. And over to you, Kees.
Thanks very much, Wouter. Hi, everyone. My name is Kees. I'm Principal Product Manager at Zivver. So I'm responsible for the entire user experience that Wouter was talking about. So everyone that interacts with Zivver, that's what sits in my domain. I've been with Zivver for about a year. But before this, I was head of product for a banking administration, a software provider with about 100 billion euros of assets in the system. So naturally, IT security was very much a front and center of every single decision we made there. And that's what led me to Zivver to help organizations prevent data loss through smart technology. And on top of that, I'm a self-confessed email technology geek. I love diving into the details of email technology and how we can improve security.
Yeah, and that's exactly the type of geek that we love to have on board, Kees. So it's good to have you in the company. The agenda is always a bit abstract, but still good to share that we have an agenda with about 7 topics. First of all, diving into the question of data security training. It has a place in public sector, but is it enough? That requires us to have a look at how to avoid data leaks in the public sector, recognizing that public sector employees have important jobs to focus on, and that we have found in our studies across, it's one of the biggest studies ever performed on this topic, that there is a deep desire across public sector and other verticals that deal with a lot of sensitive information from employees to actually be able to focus on their job, which we have called the freedom to focus. We see that training is an important foundation, but should be added with smart technologies, which we will be discussing to make sure that you can enable your employees to work safely and effortlessly. And those topics will sort of be the guideline of the agenda that we go through today. I will do the first bit, then hand over to Kees, and at the end you will see me return to make some final observations, and then join the Q&A with hopefully a lot of questions. As Matt said, indeed, don't be shy, share your questions. That only adds to the interaction. So we set for this webinar the topic around data security training, is it enough? I think the answer to that is in part obvious. It starts with the question or the answer, is there a place for data security training at all? Well, we asked that as part of our research, and 90% and 91% of IT leaders in the public sector absolutely agree that there is always a place for data security training for employees. They told us that in the global study that we did. It's available soft copy, digital, but also hard copy if you would like one. They told us, yes, of course, there is always a place for data security training for employees. And we agree with that. That makes sense. But then the question is it really enough? It provokes the question, is security training enough alone? Can you train your employees to behave compliantly and securely 100% of the time? And I think the most relevant one maybe is, regardless of whether it is possible, is security training alone the best approach when it comes to serving your employees and protecting the data of your organizations? And that is what we want to dive into today. As I said, it then all starts with how to avoid data leaks in the public sector, which requires an understanding of what the most common areas of risk in the public sector are. And what we found, and I think that is not a new insight, that is something that is available across many reports, is that for verticals that deal with a lot of sensitive information, and the public sector is one of those by default, given the work that's being done there, human error is one of the key causes of data leaks across the public sector, resulting in misaddressed emails, the misuse of BCC/CC. So simple, but if you send sensitive information to a whole group of recipients in CC, then they all see each other as part of that and are exposed, which is not a great thing to do. But if you just look at the newspapers or the headlines, it is a quite frequent occurrence still. And also what is known as the failure to redact, sending information out which still has comments or sensitive information in it, which should have been taken out, or maybe in the right version of the document had actually been taken out, but not realizing that that sensitive information was still in the document and sharing it anyways. It's not just a report showing that, but IT leaders that we interviewed also agree. In fact, 45% of the IT leaders in the public sector see data breaches due to employees' errors in email communication as a very high risk. And that is in part caused by outdated email platforms that fall short on easy or sufficient encryption functionality around recall, large file transfer to support all types of communication across one platform, and additional compliance requirements as well. So human error, and I think it's also important to recognize that that is on both sides of the line. It's not just senders making mistakes, but also recipients typically not taking very good care of their email security, especially when they are consumers and use a free Google account or any other type of freemium provider, are typically unaware and uneducated about how they can keep the information that they receive and share back to an organization sufficiently secure. So data leaks are out there. They are part of what happens in public sector. I think it is important to recognize that public sector employees have important jobs to focus on. The reality is that out of all employees in public sector, probably 99% of them are hired to be experts in their specific operational fields. And as random examples, they have to assess permits, they have to draw policies, they have to manage employees and generally serve the public interest. IT security is part of their reality and part of what they need to deal with and take as part of their workload, but it is not really their responsibility to bear. They are hired to do a different job, which requires most of them already. And that is also what we have learned in the research report that we did and that I referred to before already. There is a deep desire in the public sector and across multiple verticals actually from employees to be able to focus on the actual job that they were hired to do. And if you translate that in some key numbers that we got from that research, 91% of IT leaders say that they could be more progressive in managing risk. 62% of employees admit to making recent email errors. I think we all recognize that type of behavior. 50% of employees say that current security methods slow them down or make them and make me less productive. And 67% of IT leaders consider training as an important way to improve digital security, but 64% of employees disregard their security training in its entirety. Well, that begs the question, how is that difference of perception there? Apparently, IT leaders have a lot of confidence in what they put their employees through, but employees on the other hand said, well, I don't really take much from that, and how security is inflicted on me, I think that is almost how they would put it in words, makes me slow down in my day-to-day job and makes me less productive. We want to make that different. So if you bear in mind that teams are already under pressure to demonstrate the right employee behaviors that we expect from them and follow the correct communication processes while juggling their day-to-day roles, you can see that having to follow a multitude of security and compliance training courses on top of that is even more distracting. And I think what is also coming to light more and more is that with the well-intentioned phishing simulations that are oftentimes put on top of training sessions, employees signal that they get the feeling that they're even constantly a target of their own organization. And that further adds to the feeling that these employees pay less attention to their actual work and second guess their every move when it comes to handling more sensitive information. And I find it worrying that we actually see people reporting, and I see that across our customers, prospects, but also in this research report, that employees working with sensitive information in ways where they are across multiple communication platforms, etc., underscore that they feel stressed by that responsibility and feel that it actually takes out of the work that they are supposed to be doing. So what we believe is that training has an important role. We agree with everybody who said that, and that training lays the foundation, really. IT leaders in the public sector have the responsibility to deploy security and awareness training, but do so in a targeted way. It should be mostly about the why of digital security, because we see that that is oftentimes misunderstood. There's a lot of focus on what you should do, but not why the topic is so relevant and important. And should probably less about how exactly, educating employees on digital security. What risks do you face? What is the potential impact of those risks? And what are common causes of risks like incoming dangerous emails or risks in sending out those emails, so that they have a base level understanding of the importance and, well, what could be causes of data leaks and other risks in their work. That knowledge is an essential for the best assessment of any situation and the best way to act in those situations. That knowledge base should be there. But we also feel that progressive IT security should go further. Even with security training, there are thousands of data breaches in the public sector every month. They have a major impact on the organizations and the individuals affected, and on the trust of the confidence of the public in the services provided. So we feel that we need to do more, and that security, those responsible for security in public sector should do more. And that is also where we think that we all agree. In our global study, we learned that a huge 91% of IT decision makers indicated that they could be more progressive with how they manage risk. So that begs the question, what does then progressive and compliant IT security actually look like for the public sector? And with that, I'm happy to hand over to Kees to dive into that topic.
Great, thanks very much, Wouter. So indeed, a pretty astonishing figure, 91% of IT decision makers agreeing that they could be more progressive in managing risk. So what does that look like? In our view, it very much begins with a frequent review of security practices. We see that threats are constantly evolving, new phishing techniques, new spamming techniques. We see new technologies are being introduced, new ways of communicating, new tools, new ways of storing and sharing information. And people's behavior changes over time as we learn about these new technologies. As new generations of employees come in, behavior changes. So security practices need to be frequently reviewed in order to stay relevant. And we see that in the research that we did. So 51% of IT leaders in central and local government agree that a more frequent review of security practices is indeed key in implementing a more progressive approach to IT security. So that's a nice figure, but at the same time, we see that more than half of those same IT leaders indicate actually that their last security review was more than a year ago. That's quite a long time, given how fast the landscape is evolving. And only 28% indicated that their security approach is under constant review. What's quite promising, actually, in our research is that it showed that this 28% is actually higher than any other sector that we surveyed. So that's a promising sign for the public sector. But I hope we all agree that there's still plenty of room for improvement here. So, of course, frequently reviewing security practices is probably a good idea, but we need to do something with that review. And that's where proactive risk management comes in. So rather than only reacting to risks and security incidents, public sector organizations need to actively identify the potential risks they face and implement countermeasures before data incidents and data breaches occur. In our research, we also surveyed about this topic, and we found that almost half, 42% of IT decision makers in central and local government agree that progressive risk management should be more proactive than reactive. So that's not a bad number, but to me, it's quite striking when you consider actually the inverse implication of that, which is that 58% of IT leaders in the public sector apparently don't consider proactive risk management a part of progressive IT security. And that's quite a surprising statistic to me, because in our view, if we want to have any hope of a reduction in the number of data breaches in the public sector, then proactive risk management needs to become the norm. In taking a proactive approach, it's also important to take a really risk-based approach. So my background before I joined Zivver and made it my mission to improve communications technology, I spent several years of my life sailing. And yeah, if I'm going to cross an ocean, I'm going to take very different precautions, safety precautions, than if I'm taking a dinghy out for an afternoon of sailing. And I think that principle very much applies to organizations as well. As an organization, you need to evaluate the risks that your organization faces based on your employees, the data that you have and communicate with, who you communicate with, and put the necessary measures in place to mitigate any security risks. And again, we saw that reflected in the research. So the most frequently mentioned attributes for CISOs and security specialists in the coming years were listed as the flexibility to change approach as the landscape shifts, as well as analytical skills in assessing threats. There's also an interesting question here around compliance, because obviously there are data protection regulations. So how should organizations view these? And although it's key for organizations to be compliant, I think we all agree that laws and regulations will not be able to keep up with the pace at which the landscape is changing, at which risks and threats are evolving. So compliance we can therefore only see as a bare minimum. And organizations really need to take matters into their own hands, going beyond simple compliance requirements, depending on their own proactive risk assessment. At the same time, there's also an opportunity here for the public sector, given the governmental nature of many organizations, to help shape future regulations and security standards to benefit other organizations in the public sector, but also other sectors entirely. And that then kind of brings us to the most important aspect, what is seen as the most important aspect of progressive risk management, which is smart technology. Almost all data breaches, according to a recent global study by Verizon, 82% of data breaches involve a human element. And that's exactly where the opportunity of modern technology lies. Smart technology is able to detect sensitive information when it's being communicated and ensure appropriate security of that communication. Like Wouter said, right sizing the level of security based on the content of what's being communicated. Smart technology can spot potential incidents caused by human error. Again, the misaddressed recipients, CC and BCC incidents. And it can spot suspicious or unusual activity, even technical anomalies in communication that a human may not be able to see or detect. And it can go further as well. So smart technology can assist IT leaders in reviewing their security practices by providing proactive insights into their security measures. And it can help them in reviewing the effectiveness of those security measures and even start to proactively suggest improvements to the security approach. And we found in our research that 53% of IT leaders, so the majority, agree that smart technology is really a key part of taking a progressive approach to risk management. And it's not just for IT leaders, smart technology also enables employees to work safely and effortlessly. And with that, I'll hand back to Wouter to elaborate in a bit more detail on that.
This is why I have to remember to press the unmute button, because even after years of being on video, that is what we still forget to do. So that brings us back to, okay, you have security training in practice. It teaches your employees what the base concepts are, the key risks, and what the key causes are of sensitive situations. But progressive IT leaders who want to give their employees the freedom to really focus on their work really should provide smart technology that supplements the effect of their training in an effective and efficient manner. That type of smart technology, we feel, empowers employees by assisting them in recognizing potentially risky situations, and also then enabling employees to work as safely and as effortlessly as possible. And maybe a bit of an analogy helps there, because that is how I always feel that there's a way to describe how this can work. Over the last, 15, 20 years, we have all become used to car navigation as a supplement to the car. I think you can't even buy a car anymore that doesn't have car navigation. It was a novelty 20 years ago. And car navigation is one of those instruments that to me is a perfect analogy for technology that assists the human actor, and actually enables them to get the job done. And the job done, in this case, of course, getting from A to B, spending as little time on the road as possible, or depending on your preferences, causing as little CO2 exhaust as possible. All those are settings that you can select. And as a human operator, you can focus on the job that you still have to do in a car. Over time, that will disappear as well. But have the steering wheel in hand, focus on the road, and make sure that basically you travel safely from A to B. That is your job now. You used to have your wife next to you, in my case, my wife, with a map, actively navigating, looking for options, and needing to have a training to actually understand what the map looks like. And smart technology like the car navigation has completely taken that away. We now have a support system that tells us how to get from A to B, and actually over time has become smart enough to take into account actual current road closures, traffic jams, delays on the road, and adapt the road or the route that is suggested to the driver, depending on those situations. Now, if you would flip that to what maybe security technology would do at the moment, you would almost build a solution that tells you which exits not to take. Do not take this exit if you want to get from A to B. Do not take this exit. Do not go in that direction. Which would be a weird way to go about, right? What you would want to build is, and what has been built, is technology that tells you how to get it right. And if you just follow the route and the instructions, and actually from time to time apply some common sense so that you don't drive on a train track where that is not recommended, it helps you to just get the job done in the easiest way possible. Follow the instructions and you will get there safely and with the least amount of time spent. Now, translate that type of analogy to smart email security technology, and you would build a solution, and that is what my team is trying to do. Build a solution that recognizes the leading causes of data breaches and then builds that into the technology, smart enablement, to empower your staff by actively detecting if there is sensitive content in the body or one of the attachments that is put in an email. That takes the burden away from the employee to be aware of whether or not social security numbers were still in that version of the attachment or some other type of sensitive information. Technology can automatically and at incredible pace scroll through all of that information. We also apply machine learning now to figure out how sensitive is all of this information in the context of the total information set, and then help identify for the human actor, hey, this is probably sensitive. You need to be aware here that there is a compliance rule or some other type of rule that you need to take into account and basically help you steer in the right direction to make sure that you get this information from A to B in the right way, or that you are made aware that actually this is not information that you should be sharing. We also want to build technology and are building that technology, and I think you should want to implement that, that ensures that employees can confidently use their address book and also the autocomplete functionality in that. I find it astounding that we still come across organizations that have come to the conclusion that the autocomplete functionality can cause data leaks because you by chance select the wrong case, which in the Netherlands is a very common name, or Wouter actually, which incredible to an international audience, is also a common name in the Netherlands. But if you disable the autocomplete functionality, that actually requires your employees for every email, for every recipient, to figure out what the email addresses are and either type them or copy and paste them in from somewhere else. It is just the time spent on that and the effort level that you then increase to just send something out is incredible. It is probably better to have smart technology in place that can make a distinction between different cases and different type of interaction based on content with that case, and help identify, you're now sending quite sensitive information to a case whom you've never shared this type of information with before or not recently. Now let's warn you against this, but let's in other cases help you out with the autocomplete functionality to get your job done. We also feel that technology should be empowering employees to make secure decisions in the moment. They have the actual best understanding of how sensitive the content is, if anything is flagged by technology, and how that will travel to the end recipient and how that recipient is likely to receive that information. They should be in the driver's seat still to make the decisions on whether this actually needs securing, what level of securing, etc., and adapt any settings around that. Otherwise, you end up in the situations like with the sat-nav, where people literally follow the instructions and they can see that actually now the road goes down a staircase, which is inadvisable for a car. But given that the sat-nav tells them to go down it, they still go down it. That, of course, you don't want to happen. So employees should be in the driver's seat. And I think maybe that is something that you recognize in your organizations, but we come across organizations that have a whole bunch of admins employed that sit somewhere at the back of a server where DLP rules basically quarantine information away from the normal flow of exchange, and which then require an admin to sort of set the email free and let it continue its journey, or keep it within the organization. But that then means that the admin has to figure out in some way whether the information that is being shared by an employee to someone else is the right information to be shared or not. It is a very difficult task to get that right. With the right prompting and enablement of employees, employees can be in the driving seat to make the right decisions. So you're basically putting control in the employees' hands to control data before, during, but also after sending. Because mistakes will continue to happen. Even if you send out a secure message, you might still come to the conclusion, oh darn it, something is in there that shouldn't be in there, or a recipient is in there that actually is not the right recipient or not the right recipient anymore. And in that case, technology should enable employees to still actively act. And we know the functionality built into some of the normal platforms like Microsoft Office 365, where you can request to retract access to a message. But all that basically does is makes everyone on the recipient side very curious about what the content of the message is, and they can still access it. They have to acknowledge that the message is being retracted. Smart technology would enable and put the power in the hands of the employees to come to the conclusion that something is off and make sure that message content is actually retracted. So we feel that the development and adoption of smarter security software must accelerate. Smart technology is now in all aspects of our life: smart homes, smartphones, smart cars, as we have discussed before. And automated safety features have been encouraged in the automotive industry, for example, for years, have been alleviating the pressure from the user, thereby reducing the window for human error. And the same approach, we believe, is necessary and should be pursued when it comes to digital communications. So in conclusion, for the sending part of this webinar, we see that more than half, 53% of public sector IT leaders say that deploying smart security technology is the essence of progressive risk management. And we believe that that percentage must move towards 100% in the coming years through the development and adoption of even smarter software. And this change in approach would supercharge security and awareness training, assuring that employees get what they deserve, the freedom to focus on their actual work. That's it from us. Matt, can I give the word back to you?
Perfect. Thank you, Wouter. So we've had a couple of questions come in over the course of the webinar, but if any other attendees would like to submit their questions, please do so now, again, on the Ask a Question box on the bottom left-hand side. But I'm just going to flick through some of these and pull some of them out. So first question, guys, why do so many local and central government departments experience data leaks?
I think I can take that one. I think that is completely what we would expect as well. Public sector deals with a lot of sensitive information and deals with a large array of stakeholders with whom they exchange that information. So the risk based on the nature of the information is there. It's the vast amount of information, and the vast amount of sharing that goes on means that the risk factor compared to verticals where there is less of that is probably different. And to the, how do you say that? To credits to the public sector for one of their key abilities or willingness, they are quite transparent also in how they report. But I think if we see other verticals, there is more of a tendency to hide a data leak, not report, not disclose, and internally figure something out. There is also a lot of awareness about data leaks in the public sector because there is a willingness to report these to the authorities and create that learning organization and create a learning sector on the back of the experiences that we have in the day-to-day life. So I think in many regards, actually, public sector is leading the way.
Okay, fantastic. So question number 2, what challenges are government bodies facing when communicating with residents?
Yeah, sure, I can take that one. So I think one of the main challenges that are being faced is the fact that when you communicate with residents or anyone, people are used to receiving information in a certain way. It used to be post, now people got used to email, and a lot of people don't understand why email, in this case, is not a very secure method of communication. So when organizations introduce additional layers of security, it can create a lot of frustration with, for this question, residents, why communication is being made more difficult. Why can't I just receive an email or a simple message? So I think that's one of the main challenges that organizations are facing, is to build that understanding, but equally to make the extra layer of security that is required as easy as possible. And that's also what we do at Zivver, is we place an enormous amount of emphasis on making the experience for recipients outside of an organization as effortless as possible without sacrificing any security.
Okay, perfect. Then a sort of a third question here. In the instance of a data leak, what can Zivver do to support local and central governments? So I imagine that's assuming that they were using the platform, I'd guess.
Yeah, I can pick that one up as well. So we've got a few different capabilities within the Zivver product to deal with that if there is a data leak. The first one is insight into which of the recipients of a message has already seen the message, has already opened or downloaded any attachments. So the first capability we offer is insight into the data leak and who has actually seen that information that shouldn't have been shared. That's number one. The second thing is the ability to actually revoke access to the information. So in the case that no one has actually seen the information yet and access is revoked, then the data leak is fully prevented. And if people have seen, some people have already seen the information, then at least the data leak can be contained and the impact can be analyzed. And the third is learning from the incident. So because we use artificial intelligence in our software, if someone revokes a message, our algorithm learns from that and helps to prevent a similar kind of error from being made in the future.
Okay, perfect. Then we've had one more question come in as a late entry. Says, why is encryption no longer enough when choosing a secure communication platform? So I'm not sure if that's in relation to other sort of government security platforms, but I imagine they're focusing on that encryption piece more so than the sort of frictionless communication we just discussed there.
Yeah. So shall I take this one as well, Wouter?
Go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, so I think historically a lot of focus has been placed on encryption because encryption really protects against malicious actor threats. So people trying to intercept information while it's being communicated or to steal data while it's stored, and that's where encryption comes in. But we see actually that the leading cause of data leaks is human error. So it's people sharing information accidentally with the wrong recipients, or sharing sensitive information that they were not aware was sensitive. And so in that case, encryption is great. So this the human error or the sensitive information was protected along the way, but it still ended up with the wrong people. So I think that's where, we need to go further than encryption and really support employees, support people, like Wouter was saying, in the moment of decision making before they actually decide to share information. And that's where the smart technology comes in.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, Kees, I think the question is exactly phrased right. It is we need to move beyond just the application of encryption, but that doesn't mean that encryption by itself has become irrelevant. I think actually if you would take all the existing encryption layers out of secure communication or out of communication, you would have reintroduce a risk factor that was always there. So encryption is definitely relevant, and there's not even one taste to encryption. We focus on asymmetrical encryption, and it is not just the encryption itself, but then the question is, where do you store or keep the keys to get the access to that information? Because you can apply the best encryption technology in the world, but if you store the keys to the encrypted information next to that information, then probably under Cloud Act or malicious non-state actors, there are ways to get to the information which should not be possible. So encryption sits at the core of what we do. That needs to be in place to make sure that information is protected as it travels or is stored somewhere. It doesn't always need to be that it needs to travel through us, because there are open source encryption standards and technologies like DANE that can provide a very secure highway between servers. And if that is enough for the type of information that travels over that highway, then that is awesome, and we can make sure that that is supported. But next to the encryption layer and next to the key management of that information sits the human actor on both sides of the line. And we have come to learn that those are quite important when it comes to the actual remaining causes of data leaks, which are still frequent. And if you want to really step into preventing data leaks while keeping employees happy and focused at work, that is where we can add an enablement layer to make sure that encryption is applied seamlessly, that key management is done seamlessly, as simple as possible. And we also, as we discussed, the human actor gets the right nudges and suggestions to maybe not share information to this particular person because, hey, that is just a bit out of the ordinary. I think that is the total picture.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a conclusion of all the questions that we've got for today. So I'd just like to wrap up by saying, firstly, thank you to both our speakers, Wouter and Kees, for the excellent presentation today, and also to our attendees for your time this morning or afternoon, wherever you are dialing in for. A recording of this session will be shared shortly after this is concluded, but we look forward to hopefully welcoming you all back for part 3 of our webinar series, which will be taking place in March. Details for that to be distributed shortly. But thanks again for your time, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you in March. Here's all.